Hello all, thank you for clicking this video. I am look like a hoodlum. I am in one of my rentals. It's turnover, and I've decided that it's worth my time to fix up rather than paying someone else at this point. I rather enjoy it because it is somewhat mindless work and it allows my mind to be productive in other ways. I'm double timing. It feels extra efficient. Listening to audiobooks, thinking through things. I don't have a clear, specific, short time frame that this has to be rented. So if I get distracted, possibly making this video as a distraction, I consider it still productive. But I want to give an update on a video I posted yesterday concerning HEX and the effective interest rate, which I was saying, rightfully so. I was pointing out that 3.69% of total HEX is given to stakers. Only 10%, roughly, not even 10%, are staked. So it ends up being 36.9% effectively per year given to stakers. And I was concerned. I was potentially concerned. I was asking if I should be concerned. Is this an issue? If it's not an issue now, would it be in the long term? And overwhelmingly, everyone that responded, of course the people responding are people that are concerned with HEX. HEX tends to be very, I don't want to use the word dichotomy, but that you tend to be all for it or all against it. I don't myself like to be all for something or against something. I want to be as realistic as possible and always be aware of whatever downsides there are and things like that. I would consider myself, for what it's worth, currently much more for HEX than against it. But anyway, in response to my video yesterday, my mindset has changed. And I would say has changed. My mindset has been made up much faster because of the comments that people made. And I'm thankful for all of the comments that I had. Because I want to see reality, and having other people help me think through things, telling me from their point of view, it's helpful to do that. And hopefully these videos are helpful to someone else. But back to the topic at hand. So if I had just watched my video, would have made some wrong assumptions. Even though the words that I was saying were true for the most part, the assumptions made from those truths were not so accurate. So while, yes, 36.9 roughly inflation, effective inflation is given to stakers, it's not that simple. It's not that simple. I'll try to explain it, where I'm at now and why I think differently. Practically speaking, the way that I saw this most clearly myself, hopefully will be understandable by the person watching this. What I did was went to make some pretend stakes. And I took some HEX. What interest rate do I get for staking it? 365 days. Listening to my video, you would think that it'd be something possibly close to 36.9%, probably a little bit less. Well, it was closer to 10%. It was around 10% is the interest that I would get for staking a year. What would I have to stake? Was the question I had to get this 36.9% that I'm apparently so afraid of. About 10 years is the answer. And then the question might become, why is it 10 years? And it really has to do with this beautiful thing called T-shares and the way the T-shares work and the fact that it's over 2 years into HEX and I'm competing for T-shares that have a lowering rate over time. I'm competing for T-shares that were bought against people that were bought millions of HEX very early on in HEX's life. When they bought those HEX, the price was very low, whatever. There's plenty of people with millions of HEX that bought early, and they got a better t-shirt rate, and many of them staked for 15 years. So I'm competing against them with the worst t-shirt rate. And not only that, there's the early adopters that got a good t-shirt rate with a relatively large amount of HEX that I'm competing against. And then there's another thing, the average stake length is almost 6 years. So in order for me to get the average inflation, all other things being equal, I'd have to at least stake close to 6 years. Something like 5.89 or something like that. Ultimately, this results in a very different picture than I was seeing. Another comment that someone had, at least one person had this, I thought was pretty helpful to me, was the reality that within crypto, there are relatively secure, passive places to put your crypto, especially if you hold stablecoins, to get close to 10% interest. Your time horizon when staking these is you could stake them for relatively short periods of time, much less than a year, much less than 6 years, and still get your APY of 10%. BlockFi, Crypto.com, some other places, Nexo. Which makes the 10% return, roughly, for staking a year in HEX, for example, not appear that astronomical. And the 10% inflation for staking today for a year, I could potentially then at the end of the year, if I didn't early unstake, let's just say, let's take early unstake out of it, if I held mine for the end of the year to get my 10% interest rate, it's 10% more on the market. It's not the same picture that I was painting before. It's not the, how are we going to support price when we have 40% inflation per year? It's not the same picture. And I don't consider it nearly as worrying. I don't think currently 3.69% given to the stakers, effectively a much higher rate, but it is spread out over time. And seeing what that looks like today with the way things are and the actual people buying now, the amount that they would be able to dump on the market is not what I had intuited. So ultimately, this thought process makes me more bullish on HEX. And I'm not in the short term concerned about this, and currently not concerned greatly in the long term either. But I'm appreciative to people helping me think through this. Hopefully this was in some way helpful to you, worth your while to watch. Appreciate the community, appreciate people, and best to you and your HEX.